For more than 2,000 years, there's this one book that has just completely shaped how the Western world thinks. We're talking about Plato's Republic. And really, it's not just a dusty old philosophy book. It's this incredible, radical attempt to answer one single massive question. A question that honestly we're still wrestling with today. And that question is, what is justice? I mean, it sounds simple, right? But what you're about to see is that trying to pin down a real, solid answer, well, that's one of the toughest journeys you can imagine. So let's get into it. All right, so the whole thing kicks off in book one. You've got the philosopher Socrates, and he basically corners his friends and starts grilling them, challenging them to define justice. And you got to understand, he's not after some simple textbook answer. No, he wants to get to the very heart of it, its true essence. So the first big idea thrown out there comes from this guy, Thrasymachus. And his take is super cynical. He basically says, look, justice? It's just a scam. It's a bunch of rules the powerful people make up to keep themselves in power. You know, the whole might makes right argument. But Socrates, he's not having any of it. He just masterfully dismantles this whole argument, piece by piece, showing how it just doesn't hold up. It's a really unsatisfying answer. So that cynical definition gets tossed out, and it forces everyone to dig way, way deeper. And this is where things get really clever. Socrates makes this brilliant pivot. He says, hey, trying to find justice in one single person, it's like trying to read tiny, tiny letters from across the room. It's just too hard to see. So he proposes something radical. What if we build a whole city, an ideal city, right here in our minds? If we can spot justice on that huge scale, maybe then we can zoom back in and see it in a person. So they start building this city from the ground up. At first, it's super simple, just the basics: food, housing, clothes. But of course, people want more than just the basics. As desires get more complex, so does the city. Suddenly you need soldiers and artists and leaders, and that means people can't just do everything anymore. They have to specialize. And this specialization leads to the core structure of Plato's ideal city, which he calls Callipolis. Society gets divided into three very distinct classes, and each one has a crucial job to do. You've got the workers, the producers, the guardians, the protectors, and the rulers. They're the brains of the whole operation. Now, Plato is absolutely obsessed with the guardians. For him, their education is everything. We're talking about a super intense training program right from childhood. They have to be shaped by the right kind of music, the right stories, the right physical training, all designed to mold them into these perfect, courageous protectors of the city's ideals. Okay, and right here, this is the absolute key to the entire book. This is Plato's big move. He argues that these three parts of the city are a perfect mirror for the three parts of our own soul. Think about it. The rulers, who lead with intellect, that's our reason. The guardians, full of honor and courage, that's our spirit. And the workers, who handle all the basic needs and desires, well, that's our appetites. So with that amazing analogy laid out, we get our first real definition of justice, and it's a game changer. Plato says justice isn't about doing a specific thing, it's a state of being. It's harmony. It's when every single part of the system, whether it's the city or your own soul, is doing its job perfectly and not trying to do anyone else's. Okay, but there's a catch. This perfect city, this beautiful system, it has one huge and, let's be honest, pretty controversial requirement. For any of this to actually work, you need a very, very specific type of person in charge. And here it is. This is probably the most famous quote in the whole book. Plato's big, radical idea is that the only people who are actually fit to rule are philosophers. Not the strongest generals, not the richest merchants, not the most popular politicians. Nope. The rulers have to be lovers of wisdom. So you might be asking, why on earth philosophers? Well, here's the logic. Plato believed that most of us are just distracted by the day-to-day stuff, the physical world that's always changing. But philosophers, they're different. They're searching for eternal truths, what Plato called the forms. Think of them as the perfect, unchanging blueprints for everything in reality. And the highest, most important of all these is the form of the good, which is like the ultimate source of all truth and knowledge. Now, this idea of the forms is pretty abstract, I get it. So to explain it, Plato gives us maybe the most famous story in all of philosophy,
the allegory of the cave. It's this incredible metaphor that shows us what the philosopher's journey from darkness to light, from ignorance to truth, is really like.
So, picture this. There are these prisoners who've been chained up in a cave their whole lives, and all they can do is stare at a flat wall in front of them. Behind them, there's a fire, and people walk past the fire holding up objects, which casts shadows on the wall. For these prisoners, those shadows aren't just shadows, that is their reality. And Plato's point is, that's us. Most of us are just staring at shadows, mistaking the fuzzy copies we see with our senses for what's actually real.
The philosopher, then, is the prisoner who somehow breaks free. And that journey out of the cave, it's brutal, it's confusing, it hurts their eyes. But when they finally get out into the real world, into the sunlight, which represents that form of the good, they see reality for the very first time. And because they've made that incredibly difficult journey, they're the only ones qualified to go back and try to lead the others out of the darkness. So, okay, we've designed this perfect city. Everything is in harmony. But Plato wasn't naive. He knew that nothing lasts forever, not even perfection. And so he maps out exactly how this ideal state is doomed to fall apart. And it happens in these predictable stages, like dominoes falling. First, the rulers start caring more about honor than wisdom, and you get a democracy. Then, that love of honor gets corrupted into a love of money, and you get an oligarchy, ruled by the rich. Of course, that creates massive inequality, which leads to a revolution and a democracy, where the highest value is freedom. But, and this is Plato's big warning, too much freedom with no limits descends into chaos, which creates the perfect vacuum for a tyrant to step in and take total control. The main takeaway here is pretty stark. The health of a whole society is just a mirror of the moral health of its citizens. The moment individual virtue starts to slip, the entire system begins to rot from the inside out, eventually collapsing into total chaos. And all of this brings us right back to where we started. Remember, the whole reason we built this massive imaginary city was to understand something much smaller, a single human soul. So now, let's take everything we've learned and apply it to ourselves. That worst-case scenario government, the tyranny, well, it's just a giant reflection of the worst-case scenario person, the tyrannical soul. We're talking about someone whose mind, their reason, is completely enslaved by their lowest, most out-of-control desires. And this slide just lays it all out, the final, powerful contrast. On one side, you have the just soul. It's a state of beautiful inner harmony. Your reason is the captain of the ship, and your spirit is the loyal first mate. But on the other side, you have the unjust soul. And it's a total mess, just constant inner conflict, a miserable chaos, where your appetites are running the show and crashing the ship into the rocks. So after this whole incredible journey, from debating in Athens to building an imaginary city and crawling out of a cave, we have our answer. True justice, according to Plato, isn't about following the rules or what you do on the outside. It's an internal thing. It's the health, the balance, the beautiful proper order of your own soul. A just person is someone whose inner world is working exactly as it should, in perfect harmony. But Plato's vision leaves us with a really tough, lingering question. To get this perfectly just, harmonious society, he calls for some pretty extreme things. We're talking strict censorship, a rigid class system you're born into, even telling people a noble lie to keep order. And that forces us to ask, is a perfect society worth that price? Is it worth giving up our individual freedoms? That's the question the Republic threw out there thousands of years ago, and it's one we are absolutely still debating right now.